They told her to stay in the tent and let the real snipers handle it. Staff Sergeant Nora Kincaid was 27, held the battalion's longest confirmed kill at 1,247 meters, and had just been dismissed like a clerk who wandered into the wrong briefing. The firebase was surrounded. 17 Taliban fighters had them pinned in a valley where helicopters couldn't reach. Han, the man who just waved her off, had never fired a shot outside of a training range. Staff Sergeant Nora Kincaid sat cross-legged on the dusty floor of Firebase Whiskey, cleaning her M40A5 sniper rifle with movements so practiced they looked like meditation. She was 27 years old, compact at 5'4", with calloused hands and eyes that never stopped calculating distance and wind. The firebase sat in a valley in Kunar province, Afghanistan, where the mountains pressed in like walls and the heat made everything shimmer. She'd been Army for 6 years now, assigned to the 3rd Infantry Division as part of a specialized marksmanship unit. Most soldiers at the firebase knew her as the quiet one who kept to herself, always with that rifle, always watching the ridgelines. They didn't know she held the battalion record for longest confirmed kill. They didn't ask and she didn't tell. If you want to hear more stories about veterans who proved everyone wrong, hit that subscribe button. These are the stories that need to be told. The firebase had 47 soldiers. 17 Taliban fighters were moving through the mountains around them, and the radios had just gone silent. Nora grew up in rural Montana on her grandfather's ranch, where the nearest neighbor was 11 miles away and dinner depended on whether you could shoot straight. Her grandfather, Vernon Kincaid, had been a Marine Scout sniper in Vietnam. He didn't talk about the war much, but he taught her everything about rifles. She was 8 years old the first time she hit a target at 400 yards. By 14, she was dropping elk at distances that made grown hunters shake their heads. Vernon taught her patience, how to control her breathing when her heart was pounding, how to read wind by watching grass move 1,000 yards away, how to wait perfectly still for 3 hours if that's what the shot required. He never treated her differently because she was a girl. He just expected excellence. When Nora joined the Army at 21, she went straight for infantry after the combat exclusion policy was lifted. She scored expert marksman in basic training, then pushed for sniper school. The instructors were skeptical at first. She was small female and looked younger than her age. But she outshot 31 men in her class and graduated 2nd overall. Her final test score 96 out of 100. She didn't do it for recognition. She did it because her grandfather taught her that skill doesn't care about your size or your gender. It only cares about whether you can make the shot when everything depends on it. The briefing tent was hot and crowded. Captain Marcus Drell stood at the front. A map of the surrounding valley spread across the table. He was 34 career infantry, with the kind of confidence that came from never being told he couldn't do something. Nora had been tracking the Taliban movements for 2 days. She'd spotted their patterns, mapped their routes, identified their overwatch positions. She'd written everything in her observation log and submitted it through proper channels. When she entered the briefing, she expected to discuss her findings. Captain Drell glanced at her, then back at his map. He spoke to the other soldiers, his voice carrying that particular tone officers use when they've already made up their minds. The enemy was using the eastern ridgeline. Standard assault response. Suppress with machine gun fire, call for air support, wait for extraction. Textbook Nora cleared her throat. She'd seen something different. The eastern ridge was a diversion. The real threat was northwest, where 3 shooters had established positions with clear lines on the firebase's only vehicle exit and the command center. She'd watched them prepare those positions for 36 hours. Captain Drell finally looked at her. He asked if she had combat experience. She said yes, 7 months in country, 14 confirmed kills. He nodded the way you nod at a child who's trying to contribute to an adult conversation. He told her they had experienced snipers who would handle it. He gestured to Staff Sergeant Raymond Cole, a 32-year-old sniper who'd been in country for 3 weeks. Cole had qualified expert at the range in Fort Benning. He'd never fired at a living target. Drell told Nora to stay in the tent and coordinate communications. Radio work. Support staff. He actually used those words, support staff. Then he turned back to his map like she'd already left. Nora stood there for 5 seconds. Her jaw was tight. Then she walked out without saluting. Nora sat on an empty ammunition crate behind the supply tent, her rifle across her knees. Her hands weren't shaking, but they wanted to. She'd spent 6 years proving herself. 6 years of being the only woman in rooms full of men who assumed she was lost. 6 years of outperforming expectations and still being treated like a volunteer who wandered into the wrong building. She thought about her grandfather. He'd been passed over for promotions in the Marines because he spoke his mind to officers who made bad calls. He told her once that the military doesn't always reward being right. It rewards being agreeable. But he also told her that when lives are on the line, agreeable doesn't mean anything. She knew what she'd seen. 3 Taliban snipers, Northwest Ridge, 200 meters out. They'd been setting up a kill zone. The firebase was about to walk into an ambush, and Captain Drell was looking in the wrong direction because he trusted Cole more than her. Not because Cole was better. Because Cole looked the part. Nora checked her rifle. The M40A5 was loaded, zeroed for 1,000 meters, adjusted for the elevation and heat. She'd made shots like this 100 times, but never when it mattered this much. Never when she'd been told to sit down and let someone else handle it. She could follow orders, or she could do her job. Those weren't always the same thing. At 1640 hours, the attack started. Not from the east like Drell predicted. From the northwest, exactly where Nora had said. The first shots hit the command center. 2 soldiers went down before anyone realized where the fire was coming from. The machine gunners spun their weapons around, but they were shooting at shadows. The Taliban snipers were dug in, camouflaged, invisible against the rock. Cole grabbed his rifle and ran to the western barrier. He set up behind sandbags, scanning the ridge through his scope. Nora watched from 40 meters away. She saw him searching, saw him tense, saw him fire 3 shots at nothing. He was guessing. Panic shooting. He had no idea where the targets were. Another soldier dropped. Then another. The Taliban had them pinned. Radio calls went out for air support, but the closest Apache was 22 minutes away. The medevac couldn't land under fire. They were trapped. Captain Drell was shouting orders, trying to organize suppressive fire. But you can't suppress what you can't see. Cole fired again. Missed again. He was shooting at muzzle flash, but by the time he saw the flash, the shooter had already moved. Nora made a choice. She grabbed her rifle and moved to the northwest corner of the firebase, away from where Drell had positioned everyone. She found a gap in the barriers, a small opening with a clear view of the ridge. She went prone, her body flat against the dirt, the stock of her rifle pressed into her shoulder. She slowed her breathing. Her heart rate dropped. The chaos around her faded into background noise. Through her scope, she scanned the ridgeline. Not the obvious positions, the smart ones. The places she would use. Then she saw him. A slight movement. A shadow that didn't match the rock. Range 1,240 meters. Wind left to right approximately 8 miles per hour. Elevation, target 340 feet above her position. Temperature 96 degrees. She adjusted for all of it in 3 seconds. The first Taliban sniper shifted his weight, preparing for another shot. Nora saw the barrel of his rifle, just a dark line against lighter rock. She put the crosshairs 2 feet to the left of where he was now, where he would be when the bullet arrived. She exhaled halfway, held it and squeezed. The M40 kicked against her shoulder. The sound rolled across the valley. Through her scope, she saw the target drop. She didn't celebrate. She cycled the bolt, chambered another round and kept scanning. 12 seconds later, she found the second shooter. He'd moved after hearing her shot, but he moved to another predetermined position. Nora had predicted it. She was already aimed there. Second shot. Second hit. The enemy fire from the ridge cut in half. The third sniper was smarter. He stayed completely still, knowing movement would kill him. But Nora had been watching that ridge for 2 days. She knew every rock, every shadow, every position that offered both cover and a good angle on the firebase. There were only 4 spots he could be. She checked each one methodically. There, a shape that was too regular, too straight, man-made. The third shot took her 18 seconds to set up. It was the hardest of the 3. A target partially concealed behind rock, only his head and shoulder visible. The margin of error was 6 inches. She fired. The shape collapsed. The enemy fire stopped. The valley went quiet. Nora stayed in position, scanning for threats, her breathing steady. Behind her she heard Captain Drell yelling, asking who made those shots, Cole told him. To his credit, he told the truth. He said he never saw the targets. Said someone else made the kills from the north position. Drell walked over to where Nora was still lying prone, her eyes still pressed to the scope. He stood there for a long moment. Then he asked her to confirm the kills. She did. 3 targets, northwest ridge, 1,200 to 1,300 meters. The observation posts verified it. The enemy fire had completely stopped from that position. Drell didn't apologize. Officers rarely do, but he asked her to brief the entire firebase on what she'd seen, how she'd tracked the Taliban movements, and why she'd known where they would position themselves. She did. The room was silent. Cole listened like a student. 2 days later, Drell reorganized the sniper assignments. Nora became primary overwatch for the firebase. Cole became her spotter. He didn't complain. He asked her to teach him how she read terrain like that. The army doesn't change overnight. Nora still walked into rooms where people underestimated her. But at Firebase Whiskey, nobody questioned her judgment again. When she called a threat, they listened. When she said she had a shot, they trusted her. Her grandfather would have been proud, not because she proved anyone wrong, but because when the moment came, when lives depended on it, she made the shot. That's all he ever asked of her. The jungle had fallen silent. Her M40 spoke next, and everyone heard it.